Hey everyone, and welcome to another October. Anyone who grew up in the 80s and the early 90s was no stranger to the pre-ESRB era of gaming. We never forgot the controversy surrounding games like Mortal Kombat or Night Trap, unfounded as they were. But they weren't the first to raise some eyebrows. One of the most notable in 1988 was the original arcade version of Splatterhouse. Not only was it surprising to see such a violent title come from Namco, the same company putting out games like Pac-Man and Mappy, but it became the first arcade game to ever receive a parental warning label. And after playing it, it's not hard to see why. Although a home version of the game was released on the TurboGrafx-16 in the US, it featured some heavy changes to the visuals, with the gore turned down quite a bit, and other tweaks to the main character's appearance, so he would look less like Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th movies. This made the arcade version the definitive way to play the game in the United States. But we're talking about a game from almost 34 years ago now. Is it still worth tracking down and playing today? Strap on those hockey masks, and we'll see just how well the original Splatterhouse holds up today. Developed and released by Namco in November of 1988 for Japan, and February and March of 1989 for North America and Europe respectively, Splatterhouse is a side-scrolling beat-em-up action game with a major focus on gore, atmosphere, and other horror movie themes. For something so simple in appearance, it's actually got quite a bit of lore behind it, thankfully provided in the instructions of the TurboGrafx-16 version. The story focuses on Rick Taylor and Jennifer Willis, two local parapsychology students who set out and find a mansion while trying to get out of a terrible storm. This mansion is said to be that of Dr. West, a world-renowned doctor long rumored to hold some kind of unknown experiments. All we hear next is the sound of Jennifer shrieking while Rick begins to black out. He comes to after being awoken by a mysterious mask that binds itself to his face. We later come to know this as the Terror Mask, which changes Rick's entire appearance and gives him super strength. What follows next is a trek through the West Mansion in search of Jennifer and survival against every horror that this mansion has to offer. Your basic controls of this game are pretty straightforward. Rick moves right and left against a 2D plane with the ability to punch, do a low kick, jump, and even perform a slide kick. Aside from fighting with his bare hands, Rick also comes across multiple weapons that he can pick up, like meat cleavers, 2x4s, and even shotguns to make short work of whatever comes his way. And he'll need all the help he can get, as enemies come from every which way to take him down. Okay, so the gameplay may not sound like anything special, and you could argue it isn't, but that's not really the draw here. Oh no, this game earned its cult status in a different kind of way. And that way was throwing references to every 80s horror movie you could shake a stick at. You've got nods to everything from Friday the 13th to Evil Dead 2 to Re-Animator and everything in between. To say the developers wore their influences on their sleeves here would be a grave understatement. The game has a total of 7 stages, with each one being very different from the last. Each one has you moving forward to fight and get past enemies, while some strange force follows you to prevent you from staying in place too long. You normally move through multiple rooms across multiple screens and encounter different types of challenges, like hordes of various enemies, tricky patterns, and even some platforming challenges here and there. Some of these stages also end with some wild boss encounters. The creepy atmosphere is really brought to life thanks to a creative form of graphic design that focuses on intricate details and bringing the mansion to life in a raw and muddy kind of way that suits this game's style perfectly. And as all good horror projects know, that graphical style would mean nothing at all without an equally robust set of sound effects and music to go with it. And I can honestly say that even now, these sound effects still manage to leave you feeling creeped out and unsettled. Whether it's the sound of creatures screaming when you knock them out, or the various screeches and other sounds you hear in the background, it's sure to stick with you. While some of these graphics and sounds were lost in the conversion of the TurboGrafx-16 version, it still managed to do a great job as a home console port, despite the limitations it was given. How's the game's length? Well, potentially you could beat the game in less than half an hour, if you know what you're doing. But you won't. Not the first time. Oh no. This game has what we now like to call old-school difficulty. That means you're going to find yourself dying for all kinds of random reasons, most of which you have no way of predicting the first time. The more you play and learn all the patterns of where each enemy is going to pop up, you begin to slowly master the game until you reach the next stage and have to begin the process all over again. To do this, you're given a small handful of lives and continues to go by. Unlike most arcade games, which typically leave you to continue from the place you died, Splatterhouse forces you to either restart from the beginning of the last room you entered, or if you run out of lives, start from the beginning of the stage. While it's nice that the game doesn't force you to start from the very beginning each time, this will no doubt cause players to get stuck, trying to figure out how to get past the next obstacle before being able to master it and move on. The game also has a sick sense of humor, often making you think you've completed a stage, only to get attacked by one more surprise before it ends. That's what I mean when I say old school difficulty. Although each stage is short, they all end up being very distinct and memorable, as I said before, due to all of the wild things that happen in them. One minute you may be fighting off waves of enemies with a shotgun, the next you could be trapped in a room with a bunch of furniture trying to take you out. And it's that what comes next mentality that really does make you want to keep going and seeing what's around the next corner. This goes for the game's story as well. While the main events in it are simple enough to understand, the events after the 5th stage are a little harder to pick up on without some context. This is due in part to the game having no major cutscenes in it aside from the intro and outro. Let's dial it back a bit, as we're about to get into major story spoilers here. While the mysteries behind Dr. West and the Terror Mask still loomed, Rick's main goal was to find and save Jennifer above all else. We finally get there at the end of Stage 5, where Rick finds her laid across a couch by the creatures that kidnapped her before. She starts to speak, until suddenly... Yikes! After those creatures did God knows what to Jennifer, she's now turned into some kind of horrifying monster that becomes the main boss fight of the stage. The fight isn't too difficult for about 2/3 of the battle, while the 3rd phase is very easy to mess up and die at if you don't know exactly what you're doing. That said, even if the fight were completely easy, I think it still would have felt like quite a blow mentally. You're supposed to be keeping your cool while fighting the love of your life. The developers only further drive the knife into the wound by having her transform back between each phase. After the 3rd and final phase of the fight, it's all over. Jennifer manages to heartbreakingly say thank you before disappearing completely. This moment was so climactic, I think some people would have been okay if the game had simply ended right then and there. But we're not done yet. After Jennifer's death, Rick follows the creature into a large bloody hole. It may not be obvious here, but in this stage we learn that the mansion itself is actually alive and has to be taken out from the inside. After a slow trek across a hallway with bubbles of enemies coming in each and every direction, we reach the mansion's core. Taking it down brings about the mansion's destruction, and the final stage. This is another stage that can be pretty confusing without some context provided. After defeating the house's womb, Rick makes his way out of the now burning mansion with flying logs and flaming demons aplenty. At the end of this platforming barrage, he reaches a grave marker. For some unknown reason, the mask sends some energy into the ground and it creates the final boss, known as Hell Chaos. Some think this could be the spirit of Dr. West himself, but I don't believe this has ever been confirmed. After a lengthy and confusing fight, some sort of spirit comes out and eventually fades away into the atmosphere. Right after this, the Terror Mask breaks, and Rick returns to normal, walking away from the burning mansion as the credits begin to roll. The end. Or is it? So, what to make of all this? Did I enjoy this game? I'm going to say that overall, I really did enjoy my time with this one, even despite the game's difficulty. I'm no stranger to titles where you need to keep dying and replaying the same stages again and again until you learn the proper patterns, so this concept was nothing new to me. But that will no doubt prevent some people from finishing it. Rick's movement is very slow compared to everything coming at him, so you don't have a lot of time to react. The fact that you get knocked back to the beginning of a stage or the last checkpoint each time you die also contributes to this difficulty. And it doesn't help that there's no save or password system in place, forcing you to play the whole game in one go if you plan on finishing it. Heck, you can't even hold on to weapons that you pick up as they go away by the very next screen. I suppose it did strike a balance since the weapons never ran out of uses or energy with each hit. Still though. With that said, the TurboGrafx-16 version at least made some concessions to make this process less painful, despite changing the color of the mask to red and removing some of the religious imagery. As I said before, the game also plays tricks on you that you either love or hate. Or love to hate. Your call. Scenes like these, where one more leech pops out, a chandelier falls at the last second, or the mansion's core spits out bile in your face right before dying. Man, you just can't catch a break in this, can you? Some will also take issue with how linear the game is. While there are a few moments where you can technically change your course by either falling into a pit or climbing the right ladder, they're few and far between, and you still end up in the same place by the end either way. Still, it does help prevent each playthrough from feeling exactly the same, and I'd rather have the option than not. Also, this probably goes without saying, but if you're sick of the damsel in distress trope in video games, this one obviously isn't going to help with that. So what does that leave us with? Well, the game's greatest appeal to me, and many others, is the weirdness factor, where each room has something completely different going on than the last. You can go from facing off against underwater enemies in a sewer to going after a floating jack-o'-lantern who brings the dead back to life to do his bidding. This level of strange definitely helped keep me going, as I wanted to see each and every room and scenario that the game had to offer as a result. The rooms and enemy designs were all very memorable to me, to the point where I still have a lot of them fresh in my mind, even weeks after playing. I'm pretty sure the image of Jen crying and transforming into that terrifying creature is going to be stuck in my head for the rest of my life even. People who don't enjoy difficult games will no doubt want to stay far away from this one, as well as most of the main series. The only way to really progress and finish this game is to move forward, die, and learn from the next set of enemy patterns that you come across, so you'll know them next time and be able to move even farther forward. Understandably, not everyone has the patience for that kind of thing, especially when there's no way to save your progress or use any kind of password system, keeping in mind that this game was designed to steal all your quarters after all. As it was, I certainly let out a sigh of relief by the time I had finally finished it. So that leaves the question of how to recommend it. If you're a fan of horror and look for weirdness in your games, then you'll definitely want to give this one a chance. There's more horror tropes than you can swing a meat cleaver at, the enemies and bosses are decrepit and interesting, and the overall mystery behind Dr. West and the Ancient Mask do make for some pretty compelling lore and mystery. But, as I said though, this is tough. If you get frustrated having to play the same stages again and again until you do it perfectly, this one will set you back. I personally enjoyed the challenge a lot, but your mileage may vary. If it sounds interesting to you like it did to me, try it. Even if you can't finish this yourself, try finding someone who can, or consider watching a playthrough of the entire thing. I believe it's worth seeing everything this game has to offer at least once, even if not everyone can get through it without a little help. Check it out in any case. You may just surprise yourself. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you played this game before yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're feeling generous, please consider supporting my Patreon, where awesome people like Brandon, Cielo, Erica, and Jonathan all help to keep this channel going. Stay tuned for more next week when we take a look at Splatterhouse 2. Until next time.